most of China's 30,000 tons of rice have already arrived in Cuba. Some people may be confused. Cuba is a Latin American country. Why is rice a staple food? And in theory, Cuba's per capita arable land can reach 3.89 acres. This is more than 3 times that of China. But why is Cuba still so short of food? Sanctioned by the United States for so many years, what kind of help did Cuba receive from China? Why are the eating habits of Cubans so similar to those of China? The core of this has to do with Chinese laborers who crossed the ocean in the 19th century. At that time, there were probably more than 100,000 Chinese laborers making a living in Cuba. The Cuban War of Independence broke out in 1868. What about Chinese workers? Standing with the Cuban people. Rebellion against Spanish colonial rule. The war has been going on for 30 years. In 1898, Cuba gained independence. Later, the Cuban government commemorated the Chinese comrades in arms. A monument was built in the center of Havana. There is a sentence written on it that no Chinese is a deserter, no Chinese are traitors. After independence, Cuba became the back garden of American enjoyment. Large numbers of Chinese in Latin America see business opportunities, bringing together Cuba for business. So Havana sprung up with a whole bunch of Chinese restaurants, Chinese commodity store. At its peak, the Chinese in Cuba can reach more than 500,000. In addition to restaurants, Chinese also offer education, one-way peer teaching. There is no discrimination whatsoever. Chinese culture became instantly popular in Cuba. Slowly, rice with soy sauce became a favorite staple food in Cuban households. China has provided 30,000 tons of rice. To help Cuba with emergency response, avoid food shortages. Cuba, it's in the tropics, high temperature and rainy, fertile soil. Why is there a shortage of food? First, the United States colluded with the former Cuban government. Large and low-cost land. They planted large amounts of staple food instead of sugarcane. Countless Cuban farmers lost their fields and had to work in the cities, but they can't find jobs for a long time. They end up displaced. The days are getting worse day by day. In 1956, Guevara and Castro led the Cuban People's Rebellion for 3 years. Finally, a new government was formed, and Cuba joined the Soviet bloc, received Soviet oil and food supplies. At this time, Cubans neither want nor need to return to farmland to grow food. Instead, sugarcane cultivation was preserved in Cuba. Because of the sugarcane, almost no care required. Harvest every year. It will grow by itself next year. So Cuba has always been a big sugar producer. You can only trade sugar for food. In 1960, Cuba became the first Latin American country to establish diplomatic relations with China. Subsequent aid and cooperation between the Middle Ages focused on teaching a man to fish is better than teaching a man to fish. The first is food. Back in the 1960s, China has provided Cuba with a $60 million interest-free loan. What should I do with the money? You have to buy big farm equipment to grow food. Not only that, China also continues to send agricultural experts to Cuba to share its orbital technology. Cuba is rich in raw sugar. China continues to buy Cuban sugar. Until 2008, China imports half of its sugar from Cuba. And secondly, Venezuela has always supplied most of Cuba's oil. Now Trump is blocking Venezuelan oil exports. The impact on Cuba has been tremendous. Oil supply is not coming up. The most immediate problem is lack of power. China's new energy cooperation has just relieved Cuba's power shortage. Now Cuba is a tropical island. The most important thing is light. He is very suitable for the development of light without power generation. In March 2025, China assisted Cuba 35 trillion watt photovoltaic power plant. Just this one project. It can cover the living electricity of 120,000 households every year, helped Cuba save 18,000 tons of imported oil. According to Cuban government statistics, 35 similar PV projects have been built. The cumulative installed capacity has reached 715 trillion watts. And finally, infrastructure. Cuba has been blocked by the United States for more than 60 years. Industries are difficult to develop. Cuba wants to earn foreign exchange from tourism, but the infrastructure is terrible. Let me give you an example. Cuba's internet infrastructure has been choked by the United States. Cubans don't even have access to the internet. Later, the Cuban government found cooperation with China and introduced Huawei communication equipment. Now we have 60% urban coverage in Cuba. That's a huge improvement. On the other hand, sanctions by the United States. Cubans can't buy a new car. That's why the scene of classic cars everywhere is formed. What many people don't know is China's new energy buses and taxis have been operating in Cuba for more than 20 years. China helps Cuba solve its power problem, while allowing Chinese new energy vehicles to be widely rolled out in Cuba, alleviate traffic congestion. What about the future? Build bridges, build buildings, build hotels. These are the strengths of China's infrastructure. Cuba has always been open to cooperation with China, because the Cuban government knows very well only China can help solve the energy and infrastructure challenges. Cuba's tourism to earn foreign exchange policy can only rely on Chinese cooperation. Thanks for watching. Follow a NOECF Chamber for more high-end manufacturing and global investment insights.